It's my pleasure to be here to talk about the work that we've done on the Strategic Memory Advanced Reasoning Training Program in middle school students. The program was developed over at the Center for BrainHealth, and it's a program that's been used with all kinds of populations, from traumatic brain injured patients to healthy elderly, dementia patients, and things of that sort. I'm just going to focus on the work that I did that was with middle school students. This is collaborative work. This was, the center had come up with the training program, and then what we were able to do is collaborate with Mandy here at Callier and look at the effects of the program on inhibitory control, okay? As we've learned from various reviewers and colleagues, it seems to take a lot to get people to go from the training program to inhibitory control, and I'm going to try and do that in this talk and tell you how we got there and why we have the predictions that we did and what we did. So this is an overview of the talk. We examine the effects of strategic memory, advanced reasoning training on inhibitory control in middle school students. What I'm going to do is try and give you a flavor of what the program is about. I'm going to use SMART throughout the talk instead of the full strategic memory, advanced reasoning training. So, you know, when you hear SMART did this, SMART did that, that's the program. I'm going to talk about inhibitory control and why we thought SMART would affect inhibitory control. And then I'm going to talk about the particular study that we conducted where we looked at the effects of SMART on inhibitory. Okay, so SMART is a program, again, that was developed at the Center for BrainHealth. There are different versions of the SMART program. The program that I'm talking about, or the version that I'm talking about, was developed for middle school students. So the content, things of that sort, were targeted toward the middle school students. It was developed by Drs. Jackie Gamino and Sandy Chapman. The program aims to train cognitive processes involved in comprehension and reasoning through activities that ultimately encourage extracting the essential gist from materials. All of the materials that we used are reading materials, but the strategies that are taught can be applied to a wide range of stimuli. We think if you're trying to get the essential gist from a piece of art, you can apply these strategies, music, things of that sort. Okay. So what do I mean by extracting essential gist? Imagine that you go to a student, maybe some of you have kids, and you say, okay, you go out and watch a movie. Well, what was that movie about? What do you get? Right? You get a play-by-play. Well, it started here, then this happened, then that happened, and there was a big shoot-up, and then it all ended with a big fiery explosion, something of that sort, right? So if you took something like, what is Goldilocks and the Three Bears about? And I did this with my little boy last night. I said, okay, what is this about? And he started with, well, once upon a time, there was a little girl named Goldilocks. She was walking in the woods. As she was walking through the woods, she came upon a house. She went up and knocked on the door. No one answered. She found that the door was open, so she walked in. She smelled porridge cooking, so she walked into the house, into the kitchen, came across 3 bowls of porridge, and so on and so on. Just a verbatim, basic retelling of the story. Now, what if you say to the student, friend, what have you? We've done this in bars, too. If you say, give me a succinct summary of that story. Just tell me, just as briefly as you can, what it's about. What might you get? Well, with Goldilocks, you might get something like, well, this little girl broke into a house, she ate up all the food, she broke some of the furniture, she bounced around on the beds like she was trying out beds at Mattress Firm. Then a family of bears came home and chased the little girl off, right? So it's another level of summarization, right? More abstract than just a verbatim retelling of the story. But then what if you say to them, hey, just give me one sentence, a one-sentence summary of what this story is about. What do you get? Blank stares, usually, right? So what do you think with Goldilocks and the 3 Bears? What would you say as a one-sentence summary? This one's a tough one. Try that one.
Simple, brief manner.
If you search the internet for the meaning of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, you get a wide range of responses, from Freudian psychodynamic issues to respecting other people's property. Okay? But you can see that those are higher level abstractions, right, from the verbatim retelling of the story. And that's what we try and do with the SMART program, is get kids to move away from just telling the basic details and facts within the story to giving us a higher level summary of the story, something maybe with the moral or the theme of the story, something along those lines. So what this work, the SMART program, is based upon is work on comprehension and reasoning. And so what we try and do through the program is get students to exercise those processes involved in comprehension and reasoning. So I'm going to give you a flavor of the processes here. So imagine, or let's read the sentence here. He had been trimming all morning. He didn't like overgrown hedges. So what comes to mind when you read that? What's he do? Gardening, right? He's gardening. Is he using tools? Anyone have tools come to mind? Things like that? Okay. So what the comprehension folks would say is, well, when we read this, right, we start to abstract things from the information. We start to infer things from what we're reading. And we start to build a mental model of what's going on. So we start substituting superordinate representations, like gardening, right? Just at the surface level, we're saying, well, he's trimming and he didn't like overgrown hedges, but we're generalizing and saying this is gardening. We start to insert inferred global facts. He was using tools, right? The other thing that we tend to do is suppress topic irrelevant information. Does it matter that he was doing this in the morning or in the evening or whatever? It's irrelevant, right, for building the model of what he's doing. Now, what if the second sentence said, he didn't like to look disheveled? Then what would you think? He's shaving, right? So it would change the model that you're building. So you might have started off with, he had been trimming all morning, and then you're thinking, oh, he's trimming the grass, he's trimming the hedges, he's trimming gardening, right? Then all of a sudden you read something about being disheveled, and then you have to suppress that gardening model and then start to build a new model, right? And so as you read through longer passages and things like that, these models shift and change depending on the information that's presented. And as many of you know, directors, those who produce films and things like that, they take advantage of this. Sometimes they'll set you up to be thinking in a certain way about a particular character and then give you a little piece of information that changes the model that you have or challenges the model. Right? Okay. But so that's from the comprehension world. The reasoning world, you find that they talk about similar processes being involved. So let's talk about this example. This is an analogy. So tiger is to chimpanzee as wolf is to what? Raccoon, monkey, or leopard. And they typically have people rank order them here. Monkey, some say monkey, some say raccoon. Okay, let's talk about how you might have gotten to monkey. So when you read tiger is to chimpanzee as wolf is to raccoon, monkey, or leopard, you look back at tiger and chimpanzee and say, okay, well, what are they? They're both animals, right? They both have fur, they're both mammals, and then look at wolf, raccoon, wolf, monkey, wolf, leopard. Well, wolf and raccoon, they're both animals, right? Wolf and monkey, both animals. Wolf and leopard, both animals. So animals didn't get us anywhere, right? So what did we do? We had inferred some attribute. We said, oh, these guys are animals, right? And then we went and inferred relationships, or we inferred attributes, sorry. A tiger is an animal, a chimpanzee is an animal. We inferred a relationship, both are animals. And then we compared whether that worked to solve this problem, right? And we said, no, it doesn't, because all three of the others are also animals. So then what do we have to do? We have to put that away, because it's not helping us, and come up with some new comparison, some new attributes to compare, right?
So would it change when you start?
What would change? You'd say raccoon. I think people answer this one based on size.
Where they're found.
Yeah. Size, where they're found, it could be. Some would say, well, the wolf and the tiger are similar, the chimpanzee and the monkey are similar, and so monkey is the correct answer. But yeah, the point is well, if you look at the original study in the rankings, they would say monkey, raccoon, and leopard. Yeah. But the point is what processes are involved in coming to the answer for this problem, okay? So what about within the SMART program? This is a table illustrating the steps involved in SMART. There are 6 steps that we try and teach the kids. The 6 steps for the middle school program are taught over 10 50-minute lessons, okay? The lessons involve sort of presenting the basic idea, the basic step, and then giving students exercises to work through so that they can better grasp the steps and what it is to do as they're reading through materials, okay? So the first step is to, make sure I hit the right button, delete irrelevant information, and this is just straightforward. In the examples, we have students read through passages, and then we would say, okay, just go through the passage, anything that's not important, just delete it. Just draw a line through it, you don't have to worry about it. Students actually seem to prefer this over highlighting things that are supposed to be relevant. Because you tell them, don't worry about this, and they love that. Okay. But you can see that even with doing that, right, we're forcing them to engage in a deeper level of comprehension from the beginning. Right? They have to decide whether something is relevant or not, which means they built this mental model and they're saying, well, do I really need that for this model? Okay. Then what we do is have them take the information that's remaining and we say, hey, look, you've altered this in some ways by deleting the information. Now just reorganize it so that it makes sense. So they just simply reorganize it. Then we say, okay, well, within some of the information that you read, you're inferring things from that. You're inferring motivation, you might be inferring meanings of words from the context and those things. Just spell that out explicitly. Let us know what your inferences are. Let us know what unstated meanings you see in the material, what motivations might be there, things of that sort, psychological attitudes. Then we tell them, okay, now take the information and just paraphrase it, put it in your own words, right? And then we tell them, okay, take it a step further. Now let's try and synthesize this. Let's make it more succinct. And in the last step, this is where we take them to the highest level, where we say, okay, now you have a very succinct summary of what you read. But now let's find a global message in this material. So let's take it a step further and see if there's some moral that you can extract from this. Is there some overall generalizable message that you can find, okay? And so it's like we were saying with the Goldilocks and the 3 bears, right? There are different levels of summarization. Again, if I didn't know if I said this earlier, I'm open to questions, so if you have questions, feel free to raise your hands. You all look like you're getting it, so I'm okay. So that's the SMART program. Let's look at some data that we've collected. These are data collected by Jackie and Sandy, Elizabeth Hall, and Reed Lyon. What they did was they went out to Rusk Middle School, which is just over here on Inwood, and they were given access to a group of students out there, and they were allowed to randomly assign the students to treatment conditions. So the students were either assigned to receive the SMART training, or they were assigned to receive mnemonics training, where they were just basically given rote memorization skills. Or they were assigned to a content group where they were taught about the teen brain. What they tried to do is match all of the materials that they used as best they could. So it was the same looking manual, right? And they had similar examples throughout the material. Okay. Then before and after the training, what they did was they had the students complete a summarization task that's called the Scale of Advanced Reasoning. So they just had them read through a passage and they said, just write a summary of what this is about, okay? Or 3 different passages, write a summary. And they did that before and after the training. From the summarization task, they took 2 measures. They had raters go in and decide whether the statements made were just fact statements, verbatim recalling of the material in the passages, or whether they were some higher level abstraction. And then they rated the degree of abstraction and came up with what they call the GIST inferences score. Okay. So on this plot, we're looking at the change score. So post minus pre. And then here are 3 groups. And what you can see is that the SMART group showed greater change on the GIST reasoning score than the mnemonics and the content group. So it provides some validation for the training, right? You train them to engage in this level of abstraction, and then we found evidence when asked to do the summarization, they actually come up with more GIST inferences than the other two. Yeah.
Sorry, can you elaborate a little bit more on what the mnemonics and content classes were?
The mnemonics tasks were like rehearsal or peg word type tasks, so just basic memorization,
Oh, okay.
kind of standard cognitive mnemonics training. Yeah. The content tasks, they were more focused on the content. How does the teen brain change through adolescence?
So it's some type of like something.
It was more of an educational type course, just kind of a standard. Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out how those 3 different things would.
This last one is just one more. It's just an active control condition.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm trying to figure out how they would be inferred to tap into the same constructs.
The 3
The 3 different things. So if you're comparing the 3 things, how would we think that they would be the same anyway? If just as the measure of interest. It seems, of course, SMART would be.
Well, you would hope so, right?
Right?
If it didn't turn out that way, you'd be in trouble. What are you
Something's wrong,
training,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Now, interestingly, when you look at the memory scores, or the fact recall scores, which is basically a measure of memory, both the mnemonics group and the SMART group showed greater change than the content group. So there's some validation for that also. If you train kids to recall stuff, they actually recall. Yeah, exactly.
But their abstraction methodologies were better with the SMART training.
That's right. Yeah.
Is what this.
That's what this graph is showing. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. With the Middle School Brain Years project, we also collected SOAR data before and after the training. In this project, we administered SMART to 1,031 middle school students in schools across the Metroplex, 13 different schools. This was a huge undertaking. You have to get permission from the administrators, the teachers, and the parents. And so we were able to get 891 of the parents to return consent forms, allowing their kids to participate in the research aspect of the program. Regardless of whether they returned the consent forms or not, they all received the training. It's just that we couldn't use their data. Okay. Again, we assessed their just reasoning abilities using the scale of advanced reasoning. This is just a summary of the demographic characteristics of the group. It was a pretty diverse group. We looked at poverty, looked at poverty status, differences between males and females, and grade levels. So we had both 7th and 8th. Okay. When we looked at the just reasoning scores, what we found is that things vary with grade level, SES, and gender. And so let me just quickly summarize this. So if we look at SES, you can see that if you take the mean of all of these guys, it's going to be somewhere around here, and it's lower than the mean of these guys. So the lower SES kids didn't do as well. They didn't show as much change as the higher SES kids. If you look at gender, you can see girls in general tended to do better than boys, right? And if you look at grade level, you can see that the 8th graders tended to show more change than the 7th graders. It's a little weaker over here, okay? And then there are some more complicated interaction effects that are taking place. The general point here is that they don't all show the same degree of change, right? So when providing this type of training, you have to take into consideration the characteristics of the populations that you're working with. With these particular data, what we take from this is that, well, development matters. So grade level, development related to differences between the sexes, and that your background matters. So the differences between the two SES groups, right? enriched environments versus less enriched environments. Okay? So then what we learned is that, well, we have to modify the program a bit in order to reach certain audiences. Okay?
So training made the 7th grade lower SAS boys worse.
Yeah, or well, they didn't show change. And we've had some debates about what that might mean. Maybe they need a more enriched program, maybe they need more with the earlier steps. The other thing that we've talked about is that it could be just implementation. They actually have done studies with younger kids, and they would provide some cognitive training to them. The kids would show during the training that they understood the strategy, they knew how to apply it, and this, that, and the other. But when they were given a test later and they were to spontaneously use the strategy, they just didn't use it. And so that could be what's going on with our boys, is that they haven't learned to generalize or to use the strategy without prompting.
And this is about how many pieces they give you? I mean, just changes. I'm trying to get at, is this really a continuously distributed kind of story? The only possibility is 2.
No. It's, I can't remember what the maximum score is, but there's a rating system for the quality of the statement that they make.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so it's based on the ratings.
So this is somebody else's perception?
Yeah, the trained raters. Actually, they had, for every, this was 800 of these things times 2. They had trained raters scoring all of them, 2 raters, and then they had to come to some consensus on the score. Yeah. Okay, so you have a feel for what the just reasoning is, what we're trying to do with the program, where we're trying to get them to go with their abstractions. So now you might be thinking, okay, got that, but how are you going to get to this inhibitory control thing? Let me give you an example of the inhibitory control tasks that we use, and I think this will probably lead to more wondering, how are you going to get from smart to this? Okay, so every time you see a car, just say the word go, and if you say anything else, a dog, don't say anything. Okay? Here.
Go. 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 Go.
Okay, so saw the car, you said go, several cars in a row. What happened when you got to the dog? You feel as though you're actively inhibiting it, right? And so we build this pre-potent response to say go by presenting these stimuli that you say go to, or with the students, what we have them do is press a button. So they're just pressing go, 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 go. And then every once in a while we throw in a dog, and then they have to withhold that response. So they have to somehow, right, come up with some way to circumvent or some way to attenuate this prepotent response to say go. Okay. In this literature, you find that when the ability to control this response, so the errors made, right, are a function of the number of go stimuli, the rate at which you present the go stimuli. If you present them fast and you present a lot of them, people are more likely to make it. Okay. So now you're probably confused, going, oh, I want to see how he's going to get from smart to this thing, right, withholding this response. Okay, let's try and get there. What we thought was this task measures a general inhibitory mechanism. So although it's a motor task in our case, we think that it taps into this general inhibitory mechanism. And when you look at this literature on inhibitory control and go, no-go tasks and things like that, you tend to see convergence across what seem to be very different measures of inhibitory control. So in this study by Miyake et al., and there are lots of these that are out there, they looked at 3 different tasks, and the stop signal task is similar to our go, no-go task. Basically, it's you're presenting stimuli, and then they're all go stimuli, and then after you present a go stimulus, you present a no-go stimulus. So they're committed to going, and then they said they have to keep from responding. Okay. The Stroop task, I don't know, you're probably all familiar with that, right? The word, a color word is presented in a different color. You just have to say the color, and people have trouble with that. And then the Anisakad task is where you have to avoid making an eye movement in a particular So what they find is that scores on those tasks all tend to be correlated, so there's convergence. So they say, well, this converges on this general inhibitory mechanism. And they're more correlated with each other than they are with scores on other types of tasks. Okay? So in this case, they use scores, shifting type scores, so like with the Wisconsin card sort and these things where you have a rule, and then at some point you have to change the rule that you're using, and updating, memory updating. So are you keeping things up to date in mind as they're coming in? All of these are considered measures of executive function, but at least in their work, they're saying they are separable and interrelated. Okay? So our thought was that in general, SMART should affect executive processes. In this case, we measured inhibitory control as the target executive process. Okay, so again, how do we get to inhibitory control? Remember the examples that I gave you from the comprehension research and then the reasoning research. And remember that there were these things, suppressing topic irrelevant information, right, as a part of comprehending some story or some information. And remember there was this suppressing irrelevant attributes and inferences when engaged in these kinds of reasoning tasks. So the thought was that these are controlled by this general inhibitory mechanism. And when you look at these comprehension and reasoning literatures, you see that people have done a good number of studies saying, hey, inhibitory control mechanisms in comprehension eliminate or suppress extraneous encoded information, retrieved inappropriate meanings, retrieved inappropriate inferences. In reasoning, you're eliminating or suppressing extraneous encoded information again, inaccurate examples, memories, attributes, inaccurate strategies, inaccurate beliefs, inaccurate precognitive responses. Okay? So you could think if you're going to solve a math problem, for example, and you start down some road and then you realize, oh no, this isn't going to get me to the right answer. You have to suppress that strategy, right? Try and retrieve a new strategy and pursue that and see if it works out. Okay? Okay, so for the inhibitory control study that we conducted, we again drew from this sample of 891 participants in the SMART program. So what we did was we went out to the schools prior to their enrollment in the program, and we discussed the EEG study that we were doing, and we gave them the opportunity to come out and participate. They had to come out to the center, and participate for payment in this. We started out with 76 who agreed. We had 34 that were right-handed and had no history of brain and learning issues. The difference here, a big part of the difference is that one of the schools gave us access to kids in resource classes, and so we excluded them from the study, from this part of the study, but we didn't want to exclude them from receiving SMART. And then we had 30 complete both the pre and the post EEG sessions, and then 26 had usable data once you look at accuracy and bad ERPs and things like that. Okay. We also recruited a comparison group. These were kids who came in over the summer, and they were also kids who were enrolled in the schools from which we recruited the SMART students. So they weren't in the SMART program, but they were friends of those kids, or they were kids who saw flyers that we had posted. Okay. So this is the task. It's similar to what I just showed you, except that we vary the level of processing through varying the categorization requirements. So we had the single basic level, which is the one that I showed them cars, press for cars, don't press for dogs. Then we made it a little more difficult where we said, okay, press for any car that you see, don't press for anything else, or don't press for dogs, okay? And then we had the deepest level of semantic processing where we were saying, press for objects, but don't press for animals. And this was a task developed by Mandy, and these are data from her lab. These are data on young adults, and these are the EEG ERPs. So what you see here is the signal change plotted over time. The 0 point is where the stimulus comes on. And these are responses to the no-go stimuli, and then these are the responses to the go stimuli. Okay? And then we have the three different levels of processing, going from blue to red, red being the deepest. And what she and her group found is that there were semantic effects for the no-go stimuli occurring between 300 and 600 milliseconds. And this was over frontal areas, so it had this frontal focus. Okay? No semantic effects for the go stimuli. Now, she also did a study where they looked at developmental differences in kids 7 to 8 years old and 10 to 11 years old, and actually found evidence for some developmental shifts. So when you look at the younger kids, again, there is a semantic effect here in the 300 to 600 millisecond range, but it's for the go trials. And also notice this is over this parietal electrode, so it has this parietal focus. For the 10 to 11-year-olds, there's a shift to where the semantic effect is occurring for the no-go stimuli, still over parietal electrode. Okay, so then you go from these data to the young adults, and then we see possibly another shift over to a frontal focus. Okay. This 300 to 600 millisecond effect, this is seen often with go, no-go type tasks, and it's typically thought to mediate inhibition processing, but you can see here for the younger kids, it looks like they're doing something. Okay, so these are the data from the middle school kids that we tested. These are the accuracy data. Here we have go accuracy, or the go hit rate, no-go accuracy, or the correct rejection rate, plotted over the different levels of processing, and then we have the pre and post-test conditions. Okay, and the thing that we found is that for the smart trained kids, we found no-go related accuracy differences. So from pre to post, we saw that they got better at inhibiting that no-go response. We didn't find that for our comparison group, and we didn't find differences between groups here for the go responses. So we have evidence, right, that the training affected that inhibitory control, at least their ability to withhold responding to the stimuli here. And it didn't matter, the level of processing didn't matter, right? We're training them to think more deeply about things, and you might think, well, that could mean that you see that effect only when they have to think deeply. But even in the shallow condition, we found that they were better at withholding those cues.
Were the differences between the two groups at pre-condition significant?
Yeah, there was a difference pre. Yeah, there was a difference in their pre-test scores. The smart trained kids were worse than the control or comparison kids. There was also an IQ difference. We did a covariate analysis to try and control for pretest differences and control for IQ differences, and we still found that the gains were made for the small.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So now what about the EEG data? We looked at the EEG patterns for those frontal electric, and what we found is differences from pre to post for the smart trained kids only for the no-go stimuli. So here, the no-go stimuli are the solid lines, the goes are the dashed lines, smart on the left, comparison on the right, and we're looking at signal change over time. So what you could see is that in the pre-test condition, right, there was this large signal change for the smart kids, and then see how it's attenuated when they came back after the training. And the same here, even if that's at the superordinate level, so the deepest level of processing. For the lower level and then the lowest level, you can see that it's also attenuated. Okay. And we didn't find significant differences here for the comparison. And we also didn't find changes related to the training for the go condition. Okay. So again, what we're finding is that these ERPs changed as a result of the training, right? It was an attenuation of the signal. And this signal, again, has been linked to inhibitory control in the past. And remember Mandy's data with the young adults. Let me go back. Didn't highlight that. Notice the change here, right, is in the shallow condition, you get a bigger ERP than in the deeper processing condition. And so what we're seeing here is an attenuation of that signal, and we're seeing it across all three conditions. We looked at parietal level, we also looked at, or the parietal electrode, we also looked at the central electrode. And again, we didn't find training-related changes in either of those, at either of those. Okay, so generally what did we find? Well, we found that SMART led to inhibitory control gains, right? They were more accurate at withholding that no-go response. It was specific to the no-go response. We didn't find the differences, training-related differences for the go responses. We also looked at reaction time variability and things of that sort. We didn't find changes related to those measures either. So it's not just that there was some general cognitive change. We think that it was specific to inhibitory control. The changes also, or the SMART also led to changes in the frontal ERP marker of inhibitory control. This marker that's from 300 to 600 milliseconds. Again, we found these effects for the shallowest level of processing, right? And it was specific to the no-go stimulant. Okay, so we feel we've shown that cognitive training of this sort can transfer to supporting executive functions. The idea here is that if you engage kids, adults, what have you, in higher level cognitive training where they have to recruit these supporting executive processes, you get them to train those executive processes as well. Okay? And then your training can transfer to those lower level supporting processes. There's, I think, an emerging literature showing similar kinds of effects. Chandra Bosick over at the Center for Vital Longevity has done studies where they looked at strategy training. They had people play games that were strategy type games and then games that didn't require heavy strategy use. And she found a transfer of the training effects to a wide range of executive and memory processes. Okay. And our speculation is that the SMART transfer is mediated by deeper semantic processing. This is because we found these changes, right, at all levels. And the ERP changes seem to be consistent with what we had found, Mandy had found, with deeper processing in the go, no-go tasks, right? We think that this generalized deeper processing is a part of what's going on. Okay, so I just want to thank my collaborators, Jackie Gammon, Sandy Chapman, Nina Rao, Mandy, of course, Matt Breyer, Mike Kraut, and John Hart, all of the teachers and administrative staff that worked to make all of the arrangements with the kids, to get us into the schools, to get the kids to come out and work with us here at the center, and who went out and provided all of the training. The EEG research coordinators and assistants, these guys worked late into the evening, many nights. All of the kids typically had to be tested after school and on weekends and things of that sort, so they put in a good amount of effort. And then of course the students who participated, the teachers, administrators, all of those people had to participate. Okay.